Welcome back, ladies. Before we dive into today's content, I want to create some context for this episode by sharing with you a story from one of my clients, Amber, who came onto the Multiorgasmic Millionaire podcast for an interview about her experience working with me. Amber is a mom of 4 young kids, 8 years and under. She's married for 12 years. She'd experienced a lot of anxiety and overwhelm from holding a full-time, high-level government job, having the 4 young kids, and also starting her life coaching business and her podcast. She struggled with always needing to be in control, being a perfectionist, being the A+ student. She was even a gymnast, just like I was growing up, and had lots of self-discipline and control. But she found it really hard to relax, to let go, to surrender to pleasure, to actually get to be a yes to her husband's sexual advances. Amber even had a not so great birth experience at the beginning of COVID that had her separated from her baby, and this created a lot of grief and sadness that she was trying to push down just to make it through the challenging postpartum period. With her husband, Amber rarely initiated sex because there just wasn't much desire, there was no energy, there wasn't much pleasure in it for her. When she could bring herself to engage in intimacy, she just felt numb and disconnected. If she did have an orgasm, it'd often be with a vibrator or just was not that satisfying or pleasurable for her. Sex, it just felt like more of a duty to her to keep him satisfied than it was like a fun and playful way for her and her husband to connect. After doing my group program and working with her unconscious brain at the nervous system level, she was able to finally release, rewire, and repattern so many underlying programs that were keeping her from experiencing pleasure, epic sex, orgasms in the first place. And about 2/3 of the way through the program, Amber started noticing how the anxiety and the overwhelm completely went away. She was able to stay present with her kids. She was able to play with them without feeling that constant need to just like get up and go do some housework or go pick up the dishes or the clothes on the floor. She started having more energy than she could ever remember having, where her sexual energy even woke up inside and she started having these amazing energy orgasmic experiences. She started feeling alive again after years and years of feeling like an empty shell. And that was her words. She felt like an empty shell. She started initiating sex with her husband again, experiencing more pleasurable orgasms, and she stopped feeling the need to control everything. She even says, and I quote, "As moms, we don't make ourselves the priority, and that's the first issue. If you're not making yourself the priority, then you're not going to make it on the calendar. The nervous system techniques that Tilly teaches calmed me down enough to experience pleasure in the first place. This work is necessary. By doing this work, you're going to set yourself up for more success in the future when you're facing things that are stressing you out." So there you have it, ladies. Amber didn't start having epic sex and pleasure from getting on hormones, going to the sex toy store, opening up her marriage, Googling tips, tricks, or techniques, or dragging her husband to therapy, okay? She did it by rewiring and repatterning her nervous system. That's why our agenda items for today are going to include why working with your unconscious brain is one of the 4 keys to epic pleasure, deep connection, and passion, and why none of the other keys matter if we don't address the unconscious brain first. And our second agenda item for the day is to talk about exactly how to rewire your nervous system with my famed morning pleasure ritual. And yes, I am going to give you access to the exact morning routine that I give my clients so that you start experiencing the change right away, because I truly believe that every human on this planet should have access to this morning routine that I teach. So first, let's understand why you must work with your unconscious mind in order to experience epic sex, deep emotional connection, and passion with your partner. Your nervous system regulates your experience of relationships and intimacy based on what your unconscious mind perceives to be true. Your unconscious mind's only job is to keep you safe and alive. However, when you're young, Our unconscious mind often picks up pieces of information that turn into stories that eventually turn into beliefs about pleasure, about relationships or intimacy, about sex, about being vulnerable, about sharing our truth, all sorts of things that might not be supporting what you want to be experiencing now in your sex life and your relationship. For example, if you learned about pleasure and orgasm early on, let's say when you were 6 years old, but your mom walked in on you, she saw you touching yourself, and she shamed you, your unconscious mind does what is necessary in that moment to keep you safe and loved by your parents. It begins to tell you the story that, well, touching myself is something to be ashamed of, I guess. And now, anytime you have the urge to self-pleasure, a wall comes up, your nervous system gets activated, making you go into a freeze mode, and you can't even bring yourself to self-pleasure. Or maybe if you have a partner, anytime your partner initiates sex, the walls come up, you freeze up. This is because neurons that wire together fire together. Another example of how the unconscious mind gets wired is that, say, when you're 10 years old, your parents seemed to have a great emotional connection all growing up. But then one day, you notice your mom, she's all distraught. She's yelling at your dad. You're not really sure why. But eventually, because they're getting divorced now, you pick up that the reason she was yelling was because your dad cheated on her. And it led to the divorce and the chaos in your home. And now, let's say you're 45 years old and you're with a man who makes you feel so emotionally safe and secure, but you cannot seem for the life of you to figure out why you feel blocked and maybe even resentful toward him when he asks how you're really doing one night. You want to open up and share what's really going on and be real with him, but you can't because when you were 10, you learned that if you were emotionally open and vulnerable, that would lead to divorce and chaos. Now, even though that event was a long time ago, you still find yourself picking a fight with your partner for no good reason. This is because your nervous system is in fight mode. One more example, so you really start to see how impactful your unconscious brain is on your current experience of sex and relationships, is imagine that you first started exploring sex when you were, let's say, 16. Your boyfriend kind of pressured you to have sex with him, and you agreed to it because you thought you had to in order to keep him happy and satisfied. After all, it's a woman's duty, right? So the time comes, and even though you might not have felt really turned on or really that into it, you let him do his thing anyway. And then you felt blah about sex, and you really didn't have that much desire for it ever since then. In this scenario, your unconscious brain may have picked up the message, my turn on doesn't matter. What I want and like isn't that important. Sex and pleasure, well, I guess it's just for men. And now, let's say you're 40 years old, you're in a 10-year relationship wondering the same exact thing because you attracted a partner who doesn't seem to be interested in what turns you on or what you want and like sexually as a woman. And also, you haven't taken the time to figure out who you are as a sexual woman or what you want and like either. In this case, your nervous system went into fawn or people-pleasing mode, shutting you off from turn on or desire. And now you only have sex out of obligation or maybe just to get your husband off your back because you learned that, well, that's something you just do to keep him happy. It's a woman's duty. It's something that you do and my pleasure doesn't really matter. So, ladies, until you learn to work with your unconscious brain via your nervous system and you start to release, rewire, and repattern your nervous system for intimacy, pleasure, and passion, you will continue to find yourself feeling sexually shut down, emotionally disconnected, not open for intimacy, or not experiencing much pleasure in sex, feeling shame or guilt about it, or feeling that it's just something that you do for him. This is why the first step to epic pleasure and passion and emotional connection is to get your nervous system regulated so that you have access to pleasure. What does that mean? It means getting out of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which is the people-pleasing response, and getting your nervous system regulated so you can feel the pleasure, experience desire, or experience connection and passion again. As an example, I imagine that you think one of your biggest inhibitors to emotional connection and pleasure is either just the lack of it, not being able to get out of your head. Maybe your partner just isn't that emotionally intelligent, or he just doesn't seem that available. Or maybe you think your body's just broken. Maybe you even think the libido fairy passed you over and you didn't get what every other woman got. Okay? You're probably wondering why all the other women who are having epic sex and pleasure get to have that experience except for you. And it's likely that the lack of emotional connection you feel with your partner is all his fault. You think he's not emotionally intelligent enough. Maybe he's not spiritual enough. Maybe he's not connected to himself enough, or whatever it is for you that you think he isn't enough of. Actually, most women think one or all of these things, and that's totally understandable, but it is not the truth. The truth is, 1, your partner is not the reason for emotional disconnection and a lack of passion. 2, your body isn't broken if you don't experience much sexual desire or pleasure. And 3, you do not lack the ability to experience pleasure or desire or libido. The key to epic sex, pleasure, turn on, passion, emotional connection, confidence, and feeling sexy in your body is getting out of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which are all survival mode responses, and into a state of pleasure, connection, and thriving instead. You do that with awareness of when you go into one of these survival nervous system responses, feeling the response in your body, usually in the form of anxiousness or wanting to get it over with or being all up in your head. Then giving your body time to release and rewire its response, keeping you from the epic pleasure and passion. You don't need another tip or a trick, a technique, a toy, an outfit, or a partner to feel more pleasure, connection, and passion. I know this sounds crazy. What you actually need is to release what's keeping you from it. The truth is, each of you is born with the ability to emotionally connect and be vulnerable. You are all born with lots of desire, sexual desire, passion, aliveness, and life. Babies are sexual in the womb. They masturbate. They touch themselves all the time. Babies are naturally connected with their mothers. They have no problem being themselves, expressing who they really are and what they want and need. When they're toddlers and school-aged, they innocently explore their sexuality, their pleasure. They tell the truth. If you've ever been around a toddler, you know they have no filter until they learn that it's not okay to do so, or until they experience some sort of trauma. And they continue to emotionally connect and be real and vulnerable with you until they get shamed for doing so, or until they feel that their truth hurt you. Because of our negative conditioning, and maybe even for some of us, our traumas, we unconsciously take on the belief that it's not safe to be sexual, that it's not safe to emotionally connect, that we won't get loved if we're sexual, or be real with our partner, or that we won't belong to our family or community if we're fully ourselves. So we unconsciously shut down our desire, our lust, our passion, our orgasmic ability, our aliveness, our ability to emotionally connect, our ability to be vulnerable and real in order to feel safe, to be loved, and to belong. Until one day you wake up in your 30s or 40s or 50s wondering why you can't orgasm more easily, or why you couldn't care less about sex and pleasure, or why it's so unfulfilling, or why you have no emotional connection or passion in your relationship anymore. This shutdown of orgasmic ability, desire, lust and passion, emotional connection, this putting a mask on, this people pleasing, this caring what others think, this wondering how you look in your body, this blaming your partner, all of this thinking about how your body is broken, this thinking about that you must be asexual and libido fairy passed you over. It is all your nervous system doing what it did when you were younger to survive. Look how smart you are. Look how intelligent your body is. No, you might not like it. I get it. But really, your body was doing exactly what needed to be done at that time to keep you safe and to ensure that you felt loved and that you belong. So no, your body isn't broken. It's not your partner's fault. The libido fairy didn't pass you over, and you do not lack the ability to feel pleasure, experience deep emotional connection with your partner, or have epic sex and orgasms. This is all your nervous system doing what it needed to do at one point to keep you surviving. That doesn't mean you're thriving now, does it? The key now is to get it out of survival mode patterning and rewire it for pleasure and connection by proving to your unconscious mind that it is indeed safe to be sexual, to be emotionally vulnerable in this relationship, that you can indeed be loved and belong if you're fully sexually expressed and emotionally authentic. So quit blaming things on your hormones. Quit blaming things on your partner and whether or not they show up for you emotionally. Stop Googling the tips, tricks, and techniques to try and spice things up that aren't going to touch the root of your problems. None of that's really going to work, I promise. The answer is to allow your nervous system a chance to complete a stress cycle and to work with your unconscious mind to get it out of this loop that you have been in since you were younger. Because you weren't able to complete the stress cycle in the moment, you end up staying stuck in whatever loop you were in then. And you show up in your adult relationships and sex life as this wounded, younger version of yourself with a jacked up nervous system wiring that has you anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, wondering why your pleasure, your emotional connection, your sex life is so unfulfilling. It's because you are literally showing up with outdated nervous system wiring and patterning that are not on the side of your pleasure, connection, and thriving. Unless you give your nervous system time to release and rewire, and unless you heal the core wounds keeping you from showing up from a disempowered version of yourself, you will continue to find yourself in the same patterns and loops you've been in your entire life. Most women will never ever do this deep level of work, and that's why most women will remain in unfulfilling sex lives and relationships forever. However, I know that's not you, because today I'm going to show you the exact way to rewire and repattern your nervous system. This is the exact process that I use in all of my coaching programs to help women release and rewire the blocks in the way of their pleasure and connection. And I am giving it to you completely for free at the link below this audio. This simple yet powerful morning pleasure ritual to release and rewire your nervous system. It only takes 11 minutes a day, and it works like a snowball effect. To put it simply, the morning pleasure ritual, it consists of a 4-minute release where you're connecting with anything in your body or your mind that's keeping you from your ultimate pleasure and joy that day. And then you fill up with pleasure through a 5-minute breathwork practice or 5-minute guided meditation. Now, I imagine that you're probably aware that you're in some sort of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn people-pleasing mode around your sexuality or your relationship. Think of it like this. You want to have epic sex and pleasure, but you either, one, lack desire, lust, and passion, or maybe you feel frozen and numb around sexuality. So you don't feel much in your vagina either. Your orgasms are either non-existent or they're not satisfying. Or if relationships and emotional connection are more of your issue, you don't speak up and share how you're really feeling inside with your partner. You don't feel like you're being your authentic self. This is a freeze response. Number 2, this is the fight response, okay? You get defensive and or resentful when your partner initiates or makes advances for no good reason. You get defensive. You come up with a lot of excuses about why you can't have sex, like I'm too tired, or maybe tomorrow night, honey, or the kids might hear, or we just don't have time for that right now, hun. Basically, you just do everything you can to not have sex, or you get defensive or resentful. And if relationship or emotional connection are more of your issue, you might pick arguments and fights with your partner over the silliest things. This is your nervous system going into fight. And if you are a fawner or a people pleaser and your nervous system is going into the fawn response, you let your partner run the show sexually. You give in to whatever he wants in order to please and appease. You don't know what you want or like, so you probably just don't ask for it. And this means that your pleasure always comes up short, leaving you wanting more. You say yes when you really want to say no. You have a lot of obligatory sex or sex just because you feel it's your duty or just to get him off your back. And if relationships and emotional connection are more of your issue, you tell your partner you're fine when maybe you're not fine at all. You pretend to be something you're not. You put on a mask and you play the game. This is the fawn nervous system response. If you tend to go in the flight nervous system response, you find yourself exploring and adventuring sexually and relationally, but it isn't coming from an authentic place. It's coming from lack or trying to fill a void or trying to fix something. Examples of this could be opening up your relationship, thinking that it's going to fix your sex life and relationship with your current partner, when really you're just fleeing having to deal with a problem in your face. This is the flight response. Since nearly 100% of you fall into one of these 4 categories of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, what does getting your nervous system into regulation even look like? Well, it means building a new way of relating to pleasure, connection, and sex altogether. A regulated nervous system looks like shamelessly claiming your sexual desire, your lust, your eroticism, your passion. It looks like showing up as your authentic self, no white lies, and you're being emotionally vulnerable, sharing your truth. It means leaning into and surrendering to the pleasure and the love that's already there for you, but you're just not seeing it. It means unabashedly exploring your sexuality, learning what you want and like and how to ask for it from a consciously healed, whole, and authentic place, and fully expressing yourself sexually. The key here is understanding that you will never be able to tap into epic pleasure or passion if you are out of your window of tolerance and in one of these survival modes of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. This is polyvagal theory in a nutshell. Some important questions to address here are, number 1, how or when are you showing up in your life in this flight or fight nervous system response? Number 2, how and when are you showing up in your life in this freeze or fawn response? And number 3, how or when are you showing up in regulation and your window of tolerance when you're actually peaceful and calm, if at all? Unfortunately, if you do not learn to master your nervous system, you will never fully thrive or reach your full potential with your sexuality and your relationships, because your unconscious mind has blocks and obstacles in the way of your thriving. So if you are ready to do something about this and you like the support and the accountability to make sure you actually do the morning pleasure ritual in a setting with other like-minded women who are on the same journey, going through the exact same things that you are, I wanted to let you know that we are starting our next round of the Multiorgasmic Bliss group coaching program the week of January 29th. The last date to sign up is January 26th. So if you think this is something that you might be interested in fully going all in on, not just putting a toe in the water and feeling it out, because I've given you all of the practices to do that. But if you're doing them and you find that, yep, this is something I'm ready to go all in on and I want to make this a priority in my life right now, then I want to encourage you to book the application call at the link in the show notes and book a call with me, answer a couple of questions about what you're currently experiencing, what you'd like to be experiencing, and we'll hop on a call to discuss whether or not this program is right for you. And it might not be. There might be another option that better suits where you are currently at right now. So you have until January 26th to get in on that application call for the next group program launch. So don't wait, because call times are filling up quickly. In the third training tomorrow, I'm going to share with you all about the rest of the first ingredient to my 4-part success system, all on embodiment and somatics. And I'm going to share with you the second ingredient to my 4-part success system, which is the inner work around shifting your story and identity that you've created about pleasure and intimacy. Super excited to see you there. All right, bye.